Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. I'm just waiting for the presentation to come. Okay, so I'll just begin by a preliminary remark about decarbonization and market price. We come from a world where decarbonization was not a big problem, so we have a lot of carbonized production patterns which have no constraints. To say it in another word, market structure is just making the assumption that everybody can choose to produce or not to produce every hour. You have to bear in mind that in a decarbonized world, either nuclear, either renewable energy, the production facility cannot stop or cannot produce whenever they want. First remark, but it's quite important because the question is how decarbonization can impact a market structure and can have effect on this market structure. First of all, electricity market in France, just to bear in mind that the electricity market in France is integrated and liberalized. It means that production facilities, producer, consumers and suppliers are competing in a free market. The only elephant in the room on this slide is that we have a nuclear fleet, and a nuclear fleet is somehow something like a natural monopoly. You cannot say, okay, I will liberalize totally my nuclear fleet production. So in between this market, which is quite liberalized, you have to bear in mind that there is still an issue of regulation, of competition and price formation with a huge actor being dominant and having a technical monopoly on the production in terms of decarbonization in nuclear power plant. The share of non-dispatchable renewable energy means that renewable energy as we know it, PV and solar essentially, they have raised up to around 16% of not 13%, sorry, of the French natural mix. And just to say that it is a system where you have on one side a non-dispatchable renewable energy system, on the other side a nuclear fleet which cannot modulate as it wants. So it's a system which has a lot of constraints, constraints of production and a constraint of non-dispatchable possibilities on the other side. Oops, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Oops, there is one slide. Okay. Since 2023, there has been a sharp increase in negative price instance. We are only speaking about spot price and day-ahead price. And from 2010, with the first episode of negative price in France, and there were almost no renewable energy in France at this time, so it means that negative price in a spot market does not appear because of renewable energy, they appear because your production facilities have secondary constraints which does not allow them either to cut their production or either to produce. So it jumped from around 1 or 2 hours, 0.1% of the time of negative price in 2019, up to 4% of the time. So what was negligible has become a real phenomena inside the spot market. And the negative price occurrence have doubled between 2023 and 2024. Then, there is one thing, we have a renewable energy support scheme which allows them to produce even if there is negative price. So the first step is to correct the support mechanism for renewable energy. Whatever it is, it can be a CFD, it can be a two-way CFD, it can be whatever, but you have to pay attention as a regulator, as a government, to be sure that this market intervention from the public state to support renewable energy does not imply that there is no incentive for renewable energy to cut off when there is negative price. Furthermore, what we found out is that half of the negative price episodes are only slight negative price. It's a negative price between 0 and minus 0.1 euro. For us, it's not a dysfunction of the market. It's just that there is a lot of production facilities with a zero marginal cost, so they enter the market at 0 and they bid at minus 0.1 just to be sure to produce. And on average, the other half is a really strong negative price between minus 15 and minus 16 euro per megawatt hour. It means that negative price, you have two patterns. One pattern very close to 0. Is it a problem? We don't think so. And we have a pattern which is really, really negative between minus 15 and minus 16. And then you raise the question, this is not a well-functioning system. It's a well-functioning market. A market that gives a negative price is a well-functioning market, but your system has to be adjusted, either because investors are choosing to adapt due to this negative price, or either because there is some market intervention from the public authorities which creates such negative price, and you have to correct it. First correction is renewable energy scheme that have to be corrected. I skipped this slide because it just describes how it can be corrected. And most of the regulatory recommendation about the negative price correction in support scheme have been implemented in France, which is a huge challenge when you know the current political situation in France. So it means that the regulator can be listened by the government sometimes, which is a good news for a regulator. Still, we still have a problem, because if there is negative price, it also shows that there is smaller or lower price when renewable energy are producing. And you have to bear in mind that a market price is a price for consumer, but it's also a price for investor. And if the price are declining too sharp in terms of how can the renewable energy production facility capture value on the market, that it means that for the investors there is a problem. There is on this slide, we just shown what is the deviation to base load and what is the impact on internal rate of return for different renewable energy. And what you see is that, okay, the PV has a problem, but wind energy has also a problem. There is an average standard deviation which is negative. And what you have also to bear in mind is that for renewable energy, which is mainly composed by fixed cost, increasing the cost of capital by 1%, from 4 to 5%, for example, it significantly affects the full cost of decarbonized electricity by 5 euro per megawatt hour for offshore wind, 8 euro for PV, and 13 euro for nuclear. Why? Because these renewable energy production facilities are mainly financed by loans, and loans, they just prefer to capture value which is safe. And when they see a declining spot price, then the bankability of such production facility declines. It means that the weighted average cost of capital for this facility is climbing. However, when does this negative price arrive? And this is where there is a link to demand response and to the global problem of demand. First, it's during the weekend. 2/3 of the negative price were in weekend, where there is few activities. Then it's between noon and 4 p.m., nearly half of the time, and it's between March and August. It's a cluster of 5 hours. Isolated negative price are very, very rare. We see that there is negative price over 5 hours, which means that this is a systemic unbalance of the system between production and consumption. And up to now, we had the chance to have some neighbors like Germany, like Italy, who loves negative price because we were exporting. But the problem is that when all the countries in Europe will have the negative price phenomena, then you can export electricity, but if nobody wants, you cannot export anymore. So up to now, the problem of this negative price on the demand side in our analysis has mainly been solved through interconnection, but interconnection means that there is somebody outside who wants to buy your electricity, and if at the end of the day all the systems are experiencing negative price at the same time, then there will be no buyer on the market, even if through interconnection there is a big market. So why lower consumption and higher rest production, especially solar, are occurring? Low modulation capacity for some assets, nuclear, and there is high generation and low demand in different market countries. We are currently reshaping our network tariff. So you would say, why is network tariff important to spot price? Because a lot of contracts from suppliers are based on the tariff, the distribution tariff, and we are currently putting some low tariff when we see this negative price occurring, and putting some more high tariff when they are not occurring. So this is a huge challenge, and for regulators and for the link between energy price and tariff setting, we see that there is a strong link between what we do on distribution, on transport, on distribution tariff setting, and what can be done on demand response, because a lot of suppliers are just adjusting their offer with regards to the tariff. Battery, they are pivotal. I will go very quickly through this slide. My main message is the role of a regulator to determine what is the business model of a battery, or just to make sure that for the battery there is a fast, clean, and clear access to the network. My advice is, for battery, we are not sure whether they are on balancing market, on volatility, it means on arbitrage, on day-ahead market, on whatsoever. Our main role is to make sure that when a battery wants to go on the market, it has no problem with the network. And what we have done recently, it's a map that we asked our TSO and DSO to publish a map to say to the battery, okay, if you go in this area, and if you accept some constraint on the way or the strategy for injection or recharge, then you will have a faster access to the network and a cheaper access to the network. And this is very crucial. I think we, the regulation has to make sure that new technology have a clear and not a facilitated, but a player level field access to the network. Takeaway, the last slide. First of all, there is a quick win when you have negative price, when there is support scheme or renewable support scheme which have an effect on this negative price. It's first to remove all the support scheme which are currently having the wrong incentive to the producer not to produce when there is negative price, because this is what should occur in a normal market. It's a win-win situation, because at the end of the day, if they produce less, then the price may go up and they can capture more value on the market if they adapt better. But it means that they have a constraint coming to the market and they are not imposing a constraint to the market. To address the need for flexibility, we can look also to have a recurring demand modulation. So it means that we have to adapt the tariff with a recurring modulation of the demand, because what has shown Adrian is that basically PV is producing when there is sun, and this is in the day. And wind in Europe, there is stronger wind in winter than in summer. So if you can adapt a modulation inside the day and a seasonal modulation, then you address with the day modulation the PV issue, and the winter-summer modulation, you address also the wind issue. We have also to meet finer needs closer to the market with additional dynamic flexibilities, but in our view, most of the work can be done through recurring demand modulation systems. So to say it in another word, you don't have to have fully dynamic flexibility. You can have a recurring flexibilities, and what you cannot handle through recurring flexibilities, then you address it with dynamic flexibilities. And facilitating battery storage connection and access to market is key. But the underlying fundamental challenge is to trigger the investment in the energy transition. And this is where I come to a point that you may have the feeling that I was a market lover, and for me market is, I would say, perfect. No, market is not perfect. Market is not a way to reveal and to give a price. And when you are not happy with the price, it's not a problem of the market. It's a problem on how people are behaving on the market. And in our view, there is a lack currently in a lot of markets in terms of long-term products. We need long-term products that are more adapted to the renewable energy and decarbonized energy facility. For example, I would just end up with a small example because I took too much time. But in 2024, we have peak hours and off-peak hours. This is classical market products. And there were more days where the peak hours was below the off-peak hours. And this is really a question because these two products were created to address and to give signals to consumer to adapt their consumption. But if you look at the market, at the price now, they are not revealing such disequilibrium. So we have to rethink such products. And you may say, okay, what's the role of a regulator in shaping a market product? Normally, no roles. Normally, markets should organize themselves efficiently. But sometimes it may happen that a public message, a public analysis, and a role on tariff setting may have an impact on the way market players are behaving. Thank you very much.